Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on media, looking at the social construction of the news. What is presented to audiences as news on television and through print media is often taken for granted as being events that are seen to be newsworthy. Yet the selection and presentation of the news can be argued to be socially constructed. That is, it is based upon the subjective opinions of those that produce the news programs and news stories that we watch and read. There are many different factors that influence the selection and presentation of news, and many different theoretical views of why these stories are chosen. In this series, we're going to look at different ideological, practical, organisational, technological factors, but in this video we're going to focus on the different theoretical perspectives and how they perceive the news to be constructed based upon different factors. Pluralist views of the selection of the news focus on the idea that editors will select news stories that appeal to the interests of their audience. This can be evidenced through looking at the output of different television news stations such as GB News and Fox News, as well as print media, with more conservative publications such as the Daily Mail and the Times competing with more left-wing and centrist publications like the Daily Mirror and the Guardian. Despite this, pluralists argue that journalists are objective and that editorial teams that select the news are bound by codes of journalistic ethics to present the news in a non-partisan fashion, focusing on facts rather than opinion. Davis argues that in the 21st century many news stories come pre-packaged, what they refer to as journalism, with almost 80% of stories being placed in local and national newspapers being from briefing packages sent by governments, news agencies and other institutions. This suggests that the selection of news is more tied to practical factors than ideological ones, which supports the pluralist argument of an objective media that responds to its audience. Critical views of the selection of the news include Marxist and neo-Marxist views, argue that the news is selected based upon the preference of powerful owners and editors who look to represent the views of the elites in society. The media, as with other social institutions, transmits a dominant ideology to the masses, and so selects news stories that are aligned to their more conservative values. Bagdikian suggests that media ownership is the most important factor in the selection and presentation of the news, transmitting information that supports a dominant ideology in society. This can be seen through focus on the economy in news reporting, the reporting of share prices and the performance of currency markets, rather than focusing on social inequalities and the impacts of poverty on the masses. While more traditional Marxists suggest this is the case, neo-Marxists such as the Glasgow University Media Group suggest this is the result of cultural biases that reporters and editors have. With the majority coming from the professional and upper classes, their focus is on their own interests rather than those of owners or their audience, and so is less deliberate than traditional Marxists would suggest. Other critical theories suggest that news is selected as a form of propaganda that serves the interests of those in ruling positions in society. Chomsky suggests that the media is utilised by the ruling classes to manufacture consent for the activities of the elites in society, for example taking action against industrial disputes or by presenting the disruption of strikes, or on a more global scale, displaying partisan views towards the war on terror in order to manufacture public consent for action against nations that hold anti-Western sentiments. It can also be seen with current debates surrounding climate change, with legislation pushed through to stop demonstrations after the widespread vilification of environmental activism in different media sources. A further consideration is the way in which the news rarely challenges patterns of consumption, as this may disrupt the income they receive from advertisers, and so many news stories focus on promoting consumption by promoting fear, which feeds into capitalist ideologies. A final consideration, and one we will look at in a separate video, is news values. Many media sociologists have discussed the ways in which the news is selected based upon specific guidelines or criteria called news values. Both Galtung and Roon in the 1960s and Spencer Thomas more recently have constructed lists of what they perceive to be news values, a list of criteria that stories must satisfy if they are to be selected for news programming and coverage. This list comprises practical, organisational and technological factors, whilst considering the demands of the audience and what they want to know. However, news values are based upon subjective judgments by editors and editorial teams, and could be subject to unconscious biases. Indeed, Brighton and Foy argue that the selection of news is not performed based upon a tick list of criteria, but rather through gut instinct and decision-making that is often unconscious by experienced media professionals. In evaluating the different theoretical perspectives on the selection and presentation of news, it's important to note that often news is selected on more than just an ideological perspective of what an editor thinks the audience should be kept informed on. Practical, technological and organisational constraints can limit the scale of news reporting, and this is an important factor in the selection of news stories. Furthermore, external agencies are often responsible for the content that is provided, for example government briefings on events or what is available from external news agencies. Finally, it can be argued that it is a more diverse media landscape, that there are more options and alternative views of what the audience perceives as news. Individuals will use various sources to access news in the 21st century, including the internet and social media, and will often have their own preferences about the news that they wish to see. Given the interactive nature of new media, this means they can pick and choose the news they want to hear and read. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on media, looking at the social construction of the news. Thanks for watching.